William arrived at the old university town of St Andrews in September 2001 and was almost immediately embroiled in an upsetting and ugly row that was not of his making. Colleen Harris had extended the deal with the media. In what was called the St Andrews Agreement, William would make himself available for a photo call when he arrived, and thereafter for an informal chat once a term. In return, he would be allowed to continue his education undisturbed by the media. Unsurprisingly, he was nervous about starting university. None of his friends had chosen St Andrews and home and family were a very long way away. It was a great choice, in which Andrew Gailey had played a significant role, it having been one of his alma maters. Other strong advocates had been James and Julia Ogilvy. James Ogilvy is the son of Princess Alexandra, a cousin of the Queen, and Angus Ogilvy, and he and Julia, who was a trusted friend of Diana's, met as students at St Andrews and subsequently married. They have since bought a house there and work nearby and, like many former students, have huge affection for the town. All three of them had obviously been agitating in favor of the place, and the year before William started, they brought him for a quiet and unofficial look around. William liked what he saw. St Andrews is familiar to most people from watching the Open Golf Championships on television. It's a picturesque coastal town, small enough to be a community, with a good reputation for the subjects he wanted to study. It is Scotland's oldest university, founded in 1413, and the third oldest in the English-speaking world. It is also now one of the best, but neither its age nor its credentials make up for the fact that it is a long way from anywhere and there are no trains or planes within easy reach. Beautiful and ancient though it is a one-horse town with a limited amount to do, and the reason, no doubt, why it has the highest rate of student marriages of all universities in the UK, my own, as well as the Ogilvy's and Prince William's being among them. A year before his arrival, only 2 people at the university knew that William had chosen St Andrews. They were Colin Vincent, who was acting principal at that time and William's academic advisor, and David Corner, a medieval historian, who as secretary and registrar at the university looked after his non-academic welfare. They both knew that William would be filling in the name of only one university on his UCAS application form. But the press, for some reason, thought he had applied for Edinburgh, which proved very convenient for St Andrews in allowing his application and everything else that followed to proceed quietly. Like every other student, his place was dependent on achieving the required A-level grades, which he did, and once those were through, Brian Lang, the future principal, and David went to Eton to see Andrew Gailey and others to discuss security and how best to handle William's arrival and the relationship in general. What none of them expected in the sleepy town of St Andrews was a terrorist attack. Within weeks of the announcement that he'd be starting in September 2001, coincidentally the year of the 9/11 terrorist attacks in the United States, the university received a series of parcels that purported to contain the deadly virus anthrax. They came, it transpired, from a Scottish liberation group in protest over a Scottish university admitting an English prince. They turned out to be hoaxes, but each one had to be taken seriously. I had one secretary, recalls David Corner, who said, "If I get another one and have to take my clothes off in the department again, I'm going to charge for it." The procedure was that anyone who might have been contaminated was put into quarantine until they had clearance from Portone Down, the germ warfare laboratories in England, where the substance had to be sent. Feeling sorry for the press office team quarantined in the police station, David popped in to see how they were, taking the principal, Brian Lang, and the boss of the company brought in to handle the tabloids. We walked in and the desk officer said, "Och, they're fine," and brought them out to meet us, which deemed us contaminated. So the boss of BT Media, the principal and I were locked up for 3 hours in the police station. On the Friday before William's arrival for his first term, David was asked to join him and his father for the evening, at the Palace of Holyrood House in Edinburgh. I think already some degree of nerves had set in, and I think he, William, thought it was going to be terribly formal, and it was quite the opposite. David could not be less formal himself. He is a cheerful, Moses-like figure with wild white hair and beard. Rumor has it he owns a tie, but it's seldom seen. He had already been to St James's Palace to talk reassuringly to the Prince of Wales about what William could expect at St Andrews. Like all Scottish universities, but different from most universities in the UK, students do a 4-year honours degree, but rather than studying one subject in ever greater depth as the years pass, they start with 3 different subjects in the first year and narrow them down. Most of the town had turned out to see them arrive, and quite a number of the world's media too. "I think he was really nervous when he arrived," says Colleen. "All the press were there and it suddenly hit him, and he was very unsteady for a little while after that. He'd had a fantastic gap year, really enjoyed himself, and there he was stuck. He didn't know anybody, just 1 or 2 guys from Eton who he didn't know that well, and he was very much alone." Niall Scott, the university press officer, had been briefed by Colleen Harris that if he spotted anyone in the town with anything larger than an Instamatic, he was to get them removed. It was not only William's privacy that mattered but also the privacy of his fellow students. "William was very sensitive to that," says Niall. "He knew the unsettling effect his presence could have and was keen that it should all be quietened down." Scarcely had the last media truck disappeared than Niall saw a camera crew blithely setting up to film outside his office window. "It was a red rag to a bull," he said. "I walked out and asked them what they were doing. I was told, 'We're Ardent, here's our card. We're making an A to Z of royalty for an entertainment channel in the States and we're waiting to film William coming out of his lecture.' Ardent, they explained, was owned by Prince Edward, William's uncle. We had a full and frank exchange of views on the pavement," says Niall, "and I said, 'You shouldn't be here, a deal's a deal, I don't care who you are, everyone else has left.' It was the start of a very interesting week. We then discovered that Ardent had taken a group of our students, bought them dinner and then asked them to pretend that a year had passed and they were looking back at William's first year, and this was to be presented as fact. All a bit underhand. Colleen had stayed on for a couple of days and she too spotted the Ardent crew. They kept saying they had permission to be there and I said, 'Well, I'm the person who would give you permission and I haven't, so you can't be here.' 'No,' they said, 'we've got permission from Prince Edward.' They wouldn't go, so I rang Mark Bolland. It became a massive story. Edward rang and said he was sorry about the confusion, they were going to go, it was a misunderstanding." The Daily Mail claimed the Prince of Wales was incandescent with rage, so angry that he had refused to take telephone calls from his youngest brother. The story escalated into a major attack on Prince Edward and his competence as a filmmaker and ran in most of the newspapers for several days. Then Prince Philip was said to have weighed into the argument. He thought William was being overprotected by his father and had overreacted to the film crew. In a very rare reaction from Buckingham Palace, Prince Philip issued a strongly worded public statement saying he thought nothing of the sort. The views attributed to him were totally without foundation. Who knows how the conversation went between them all at Sandringham that Christmas, says Colleen. William and Harry would not have been happy about their uncle being made to look a fool.